Coming up, major legislation in Washington. Representative Sharice Davids breaks down the bills and what they mean for Native communities. We're taking a look at crime and prosecution in Oklahoma. Plus, we learn about a Nakota language school opening in Montana. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover Indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We start in Washington, D.C., where the National Indian Education Association kicks off its annual Hill Week. The two-day event is full of training and updates for educating public and private sector partners about Native education needs. The event also outlines top legislative priorities for lawmakers. The NIEA will include panel discussions on a variety of topics, ranging from school climate and COVID-19 to education sovereignty. Several members of Congress are expected to attend, including Representative Sharice Davids of Kansas and Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota. This year's list of priorities includes proper funding for Native education programs, addressing historical trauma, and preserving Native languages. 36-year-old Gabriel Boric is the youngest president in Chilean history, and his first move in office was to honor Indigenous people. After Friday's presidential inauguration, Boric spent his first day taking part in ceremony. The gathering took place at the Palacio de Moneda, which is the office of the Chilean president. Afterwards, he met with 7 different representatives from Indigenous communities from around Chile. While swearing in, Boric reworded parts of his speech to be more inclusive of Indigenous people in the country. And he also tweeted that a new relationship between Chile and its Indigenous peoples is vital for the construction of a, quote, just and dignified Chile. Boric has been widely described as the leader of a new era for the country. After a 2-year delay caused by the pandemic, the Native musical production Distant Thunder will finally get its world premiere. Sean Taylor Corbett is exploring his paternal Blackfeet heritage in the new musical set to take stage at the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma. Taylor Corbett wrote the play with his mother and also co-wrote the music and lyrics. The story follows Daryl Walters, a mixed-race Native person who was raised by his white mother in Chicago and then returns to the Blackfeet Reservation. The playwright told ICT that even though it's been delayed, the pandemic has opened new doors for the production. The show has a limited 1-week run from March 23rd to the 27th. Well, Footprint Center is the stadium home to the NBA's Phoenix Suns and the WNBA's Phoenix Mercury. While fans attend games, they often get to enjoy some fun in-game entertainment. Bringing them that entertainment are folks like Navajo citizen Sean Martinez. ICT's Patty Tholahongba spoke to him about how he gets fans excited and up on their feet.
Welcome to the big show.
Big show indeed. For every home game, Sean Martinez and his team spend hundreds of hours prepping. As the senior director of live presentation for the Suns and the Mercury, his job is to create a winning atmosphere for the fans and the players.
And we are getting ready to jump into the show here in 10 seconds. We're going to start our video block first, so we'll get that going here. Let's start videos here in 3, 2, 1, go!
Welcome
just like
to the
that.
Footprint Center.
Every t-shirt toss, dance performance, and fan interaction is carefully planned out.
All right, Suns fans, you know what time it is. It is now time for the shoe game cam.
Sean added the shoe cam contest, which is already quite popular.
I always tell my game production director upstairs, show the fans, because when you show the fans, it keeps them involved.
And are you a big Suns fan?
Huge Suns fan. I love the Suns.
I grew up on the reservation, you know, tribal clothes, all that, commodity food.
He worked for both the Detroit Pistons and the Denver Nuggets before coming to Phoenix.
In my first year, who would have thought I would be able to go to the NBA Finals and the WNBA Finals? And then I just went to All-Star. It's been a crazy 2 years since I've been here.
It's already been quite a journey for Martinez, and he has more goals for the coming seasons.
Yeah, I have not spoken Navajo on headset, but it's coming.
In Phoenix, Patty Thalahunga, ICT News.
Martinez is from Window Rock, Arizona. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, actions towards language revitalization in Montana. And Oklahoma's governor says the McGirt decision upends its criminal justice system. But first, we're catching up on legislative priorities with one of the first Native women elected to Congress. Stay with us. From the Violence Against Women Act and spending to Ukraine, lawmakers in Washington, D.C. have had their hands full recently. One of those lawmakers is Ho-Chunk citizen and U.S. Representative Sharice Davids from Kansas. She joins us now to break down some of these important topics. Hello, Representative Davids. Welcome back to the ICT Newscast.
It's good to be here.
So let's just jump right in. I want to talk about the Violence Against Women Act. I understand that there's some tribal provisions in VAWA this go round. Tell us about those.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization didn't happen in 2019, so the bill lapsed. And I've been working actually since I got into office on trying to make sure that we get that reauthorized. So this has been a long time coming. And this time around, the VAWA changed the way that we respond to domestic violence and sexual assault, and made huge strides in terms of prevention and prosecution support for victims and that sort of thing. And I'm really glad that we were able to come together and finally get the updates that were needed through. And that includes bringing resources and attention to Indian country, and particularly for the crisis that we're in with the MMIW. And so I wanted to make sure that tribes have jurisdiction where, particularly where non-native offenses have happened, and try to bring more resources and justice for families and victims. And so tribal jurisdiction has been restored for certain crimes. Allowing tribes to address issues when there's a non-native offender. And then also, some Alaska Native and Maine tribes were previously not included. And so we took care of that issue. And then also made sure that tribes are able to access things like criminal databases, so that just to make sure that they have every resource available to them as they try to keep their communities safe.
VAWA, of course, is something that so many tribal leaders have advocated for, as you mentioned, since it was not last reauthorized. I'm curious, why was it important to you personally to be able to work on making sure that Native women and women all over the country are safe and protected?
Yeah, I think that, we're in this, we're in this time right now where it's really there's a mainstream attention being paid to issues that are facing Indian country. And I also just want to say, not just issues, but also some of the amazing resiliency and vibrancy of Native cultures is also being paid attention to more mainstream. But I think that, all of us in Indian country can can feel that heartbreak when we know that our communities and families are going through issues, murdered and missing Indigenous women and people, and access to healthcare, access to water. And so it's just been a huge priority for me to make sure that I'm doing everything I can as a federal lawmaker to get those resources and support that the federal government is supposed to be sending to Indian country. And so it does feel very personal, and it feels it's an honor to be able to be an advocate for the Kansas Third and also for Indian country during my time here.
The big headline around the world recently has been the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm really curious how your office has helped Ukrainians get the support and the resources that they need.
Yeah, I mean, the news coming out and like the visuals coming out of Ukraine that are devastating and heartbreaking, and we're doing what we can to stand by them, both with, of course, with our words, but also with actions, and especially in light of Putin's aggression is just completely unwarranted. And I'm glad to see that he's been met with a united front of opposition from across all of our allies. And last week, we voted in a bipartisan way to send additional humanitarian aid to Ukraine. And I also have asked the president to extend the temporary protected status for Ukrainians, which he has done, because, the idea that someone would be forced back to their home where there's a brutal war going on is just unthinkable. And, we're going to continue to do what we can. And I'm staying as up to date and watching what's going on and looking for ways to be helpful.
ICT has been reporting on redistricting all over the country, and we know that in Kansas, your district has been impacted, which essentially would make it harder for you to be reelected. Now, I know you can't speak into too much detail about this because of some pending litigation, but why is it important to you that you get reelected to this position?
I think, first of all, the most important thing is that the folks in the 3rd District in Kansas and really across the country, that the process is one that allows for the people's voice to be heard. And, I've been elected in the Kansas 3rd by the voters in the Kansas 3rd. And I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, that it's the voters in our communities who are deciding who they're sending to Congress or our state legislatures, because that's the way that it's supposed to be. And at the end of the day, we are here to serve our communities, and it shouldn't be that lawmakers are deciding who gets sent to Congress or who gets sent to our state legislatures.
Well, Representative Sharice Davids, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It was good to be here.
Oklahoma has filed more than 30 separate petitions asking the Supreme Court to overrule McGirt. In 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Muskogee Reservation in Oklahoma had never been dissolved by Congress, meaning the federal government, not the state, had jurisdiction over crimes committed on Muskogee lands. With the Violence Against Women Act's reauthorization, where does this leave prosecution for tribal nations? Joining us is Trent Shores, an attorney with GableGotwals. He advises clients regarding complex litigation, native law and policy, cybersecurity, and high-stakes government and corporate investigations. He is also a former United States attorney. Hello, Trent, and welcome to the ICT Newscast.
It's always great to be back.
So we just heard Representative Sharice Davids talk about the Violence Against Women Act. Where does this stand for tribes in Oklahoma in terms of how it can protect Native women specifically?
We know that Native American women are the most victimized of any demographic in the United States when it comes to domestic violence and really violent crime writ large. So whether you're in Oklahoma or some other part of the United States, the passage of the Violence Against Women Act is huge. It adds resources. It adds new opportunities for governments to engage in prosecution of domestic violence offenders. And really importantly for me, looking from my experience as U.S. attorney and a federal prosecutor, domestic violence calls are some of the most dangerous calls that law enforcement respond to, whether it's tribal law enforcement or state or even local law enforcement. And so what we see in the bill that really caught my attention was expanding the opportunity for tribes to prosecute domestic violence offenders who assault officers during the point in time when they respond to that domestic violence call. That I think is really an asset and certainly something that could be a difference changer when we see that nearly 10% of all officer deaths over the last 12 years happened when they were responding to domestic violence situations.
Do you think that because these domestic violence rates are so high, that there will be any kind of muddying of jurisdiction between, the state and tribal law enforcement, given the McGirt decision?
I don't. Here in Oklahoma, we have a great history of our state and tribal law enforcement working together. And if you look at the state's petitions right now, it's actually to further continue their ability to prosecute non-Indians who commit crimes in Indian country. So however that litigation may turn out, however the Supreme Court may decide those arguments, at worst, it adds another jurisdiction into the mix to hold accountable non-Indian domestic violence offenders who are committing terrible crimes against Native American women and children.
So I guess if I'm understanding that correctly, what you're saying is that both state and tribal law enforcement want to make sure that people are held accountable for their actions.
You understand it 100%. And that's one of the great things about working on the ground here in Oklahoma is seeing that collaborative partnership and that cooperative approach to law enforcement in Indian country and frankly elsewhere. We have great partnerships here in Oklahoma.
I'm really curious, is there something under the McGirt decision umbrella that you think we're missing? Is there something that you think needs to be clarified or maybe talked about more?
I'm not sure. It's been talked about a lot by state officials, by tribal officials. And I think what we have to realize that there is historically a path forward here, and that is Oklahomans working together to solve these problems, not waiting on the United States to come in and solve them for us. I mean, certainly this wasn't a decision that the governor of Oklahoma or chiefs of tribes made, right? This is a decision that was given to our state by the Supreme Court and that everyone is now trying to figure out how to deal with and how to implement. There are good stories that have come from this, and there's tragic stories that have come from this. So it's not a simple issue. I appreciate everyone's efforts to engage on it, and hopefully we'll find at the end of the day a collaborative approach of Oklahomans solving an Oklahoma problem.
I want to switch gears and talk about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I understand that you're an expert in cybersecurity, which is something that a lot of people have been wondering, could a cyber attack happen? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. In the wake of Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine, we've seen an uptick in cyber attacks in the United States. It's been on industry. It's also been on governments, whether that's state governments or tribal governments or the federal government. Individuals have to be wary as well because we do business right through e-commerce now. We have passwords and other private information saved online. So the best tip I could give to any individual citizen would be to make sure all of your passwords are up to date. Make sure your computers are updated with all the appropriate security patches. And the most important and simple thing you can do is have multi-factor authentication on all of your accounts. It's a simple step to take to make sure that you're the person that is accessing your account and not someone else. But this is absolutely an issue that we as a country have to be wary of because that is, a new battleground, and we see foreign state actors and enemies of the United States taking advantage of cyber attacks.
I want to make sure that I'm being crystal clear about how a cyber attack could look like. It sounds like from your answer, maybe it would be something like trying to log into your mobile banking and being locked out of it. Could you maybe describe what a cyber attack could look like in 2022?
Yes, it could take on many forms, actually. It could be a business email compromise. It could be a, denial of service attack. It could be something that compromises perhaps a critical infrastructure system, whether that's an oil and gas pipeline, whether it's a water treatment system. Could be that it shuts down a hospital. Imagine trying to go into an ER to receive care for you or your loved one, and the doctors don't have any medical access or access to your medical records. There are a lot of things that could be attacked. So from the individual perspective, lock down your bank accounts and your personal email accounts. From a business, corporate, or governmental perspective, protect the information that you have, because information is the coin of the realm these days. And so if you're a tribal government or a tribal business entity, protect your dollars of funds, but protect your citizens' information, because the hackers will try to take it.
Well, Trent Shores, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's no secret that language is one of the most important pillars of indigeneity, but as times evolve, many tribes are reporting signs of language loss. Assiniboine citizen Tuffy Helgeson is one of many people in Indian country aiming to fix that. He started teaching his language at the age of 18 and even helped create an Assiniboine language curriculum. He has continued his work by teaching culture and language to the youth in his community, and he joins us now to outline those efforts. Hello, Tuffy, and welcome to the ICT Newscast.
Thank you. Hello to you.
So I'm really curious, who taught you the Assiniboine language and where did you learn it from?
I was fortunate as a child. My grandmother, I was able to live with her most of my life, and all of her contemporaries spoke the language. So I grew up kind of embedded in that language.
And I understand now that you're teaching it to the youth. What are you seeing in terms of how much they're receptive to wanting to learn the language?
I think language loss has a lot to do with the strife of our people, kind of identity. And I've noticed over the years, the more a person is familiar with their language, the better in life they do.
Yeah, I can understand. And I actually heard that there's an immersion school opening soon. Tell us about those efforts.
So for about 18 years, I worked in the public schools here at the community. And then later, or just recently, we wrote for an A&A grant that allowed us to do a daycare immersion center. So that's been open now for, a little under a year. We finally got kids in the rooms, due to COVID and all these kind of things. But we're looking forward to maybe building a K-8, just an immersion school.
And what does that look like? I know that a lot of tribes around the country have immersion schools, but this one in particular, if someone were to walk into the classroom, what would they kind of observe?
Well, kind of in our case on Fort Belknap, we have two language families. Of course, Nakota is Assiniboine. We also have a Ani, which is Grovon. So we have to teach both languages at the same time. So there's two different tracks that are going on within our daycare immersion. And then on top of that, with language loss, all of our teachers are really young people who maybe did not grow up with the language. So we're having to teach the teachers as we go. So there's a lot of learning going on at a lot of different levels.
Something that's always so interesting to me is that a lot of times at immersion schools, language is being taught, but also other aspects and core values of being Indigenous are taught in addition to language. Tell us about some of those aspects and why it's important to pass them down.
So from within your language comes, how you view the world. And Indigenous people from coast to coast, pole to pole, we have our lifeways and our teachings that are based within our language. And, older people like my grandmother, for example, who spoke her language her whole life, she could define a lot of what was being said because she was a first language speaker. So as a second language learner, you dig deeper into what does the word mean and how does it apply to the day. So there's a lot of growth that comes, from within our languages.
Tuffy, I'd love to talk about what kinds of barriers there are to Native youth who are trying to learn their language now with things like social media. Maybe talk about that.
So I believe that we need to engage in social media because all of our children, that's their world. My generation was probably the last generation that lived without a cell phone. So after that, it kind of has to be a whole different ballgame. But in impoverished areas, that's a big ask for people to learn language. When you're trying to, buy diapers and all these kind of things for your families, language is important, but it's like a fifth or sixth or seventh thought. So I think there are a lot of challenges, but definitely technology can be an aid.
I have just one last question. A lot of the times we're seeing urban natives move from the reservation to other cities where there are jobs. For folks like that who maybe want to reconnect and learn their language, what's the one piece of advice you have for them?
Just research. I know during COVID, I taught several classes. We're in Montana, but I was able to teach for like the University of Regina, Saskatchewan. And so technology can really be an aid if you're looking to learn languages.
Well, Tuffy, thank you so much for your work and for being here.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.